أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. A sister of ours is very unwell. For her full and quick recovery and for the well-being of all those who are unwell, let us recite Surah Fatiha. So we stated that it is a part of the understanding amongst the Imami school of thought that the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt have the wilayat tashri'iyya or the legislative authority. What this basically means is that in addition to the Sharia given by the Prophet, by the Quran, the Prophet can add to the Sharia. Of course, there is a bit of a qualification that he should not reduce, but he can add. And the examples we gave yesterday, that God has made 2 unit prayers obligatory for morning, afternoon, late afternoon, evening and night. The Prophet added 2 extra units to Dhuhr, to Asr and to Isha, and 1 extra unit to Maghrib. And the rationale goes this way, that when we are on travel, then we reduce the additions made by the Prophet and we are left only by the obligation that is imposed by Allah. And here the technical jargon is fard, as in obligation from God, and sunnah, the addition from the Prophet. So the word sunnah has many meanings, but here it's in contrast with fard. Similarly, if we look at the salah, it's sajda, ruku, facing qibla, the timings are speculated as being made obligatory by God. As for the other things have been added by the Prophet, and therefore whatever has been made obligatory by God, if that is omitted, then the prayer needs to be repeated, the formal prayer. And whatever the Prophet has added, if that is omitted, the prayer does not require to be repeated. Now, yesterday we stated that there is a little problem in talking about this in an unqualified manner. It would be better for us to say that no, the Blessed Prophet was inspired to make these additions as opposed to him in his own capacity as an individual adding these things on. But we cannot deny that the Prophet in his own capacity might also have legislated, as in the case of the shares of zakat. The Quran is silent. The Prophet stipulates the shares for zakat. Now the reason why we need to make these qualifications and we need to say this is because the Prophet is a role model and he has to show a community that he envisages will grow how to then interpret the law of God in terms of the growing needs of the community. And that is why the Quran is ambiguous in terms of the portions of zakat, and the Prophet stipulated them. It's not to say that those portions are mandated for eternity. They worked for that time. Now commerce has changed. We interact differently. Our possessions have changed. We no longer have sheep and goats and camels, and we no longer farm and we no longer own crop. But a welfare system has to be there, income tax has to be there. Now, if we were to say that the Prophet exercised his own discretion, then furthermore we have to qualify that the Prophet's discretion was optimal, because he was at that level of penetrative insight as to what will work most optimally, and that is what makes the Prophet a blessed individual and a Prophet who is most accurate. So if we were to say that the Prophet did ijtihad, i.e., he exercised his own reason, looking at the values that were to be secured in any given command of God, then we have to further clarify that the Prophet's exercise of reason was impeccable, and he came out with optimal laws. Now, it is another debate altogether that obviously I normally conduct in your presence, that there is form and essence, and things are always on the move, and the Qur'anic forms and the forms supplied by the Prophet in his own Arabian context will have to constantly be modified and tweaked with the change of context. So for example, we gave this example that zakat has to be changed. Now, what is zakat in accordance with the growth of the community? And even now, if we travel to Mars, I know it's a very futuristic example, but we are upon these sort of achievements within our humanity, and at Mars the day is not 24 hours. The year is not 360 degrees. There is no moon to determine the first of the month of Ramadan. There is no qibla to determine the direction of prayer. Now, if Earth gets overpopulated, and it is not so far-fetched to imagine this, and we were to travel to Mars, we will have to re-envisage the meaning of prayer in terms of its essence. And then we will have to reformulate it. And then obviously the gravity of Mars is different. So the notion of sajda, the notion of ruku, the notion of direction, the notion of what is a meaningful fast, what is taxation on Mars, what is the mode of earning, all of these things will have to be reformulated. The only thing there is that our exercise of reason and ijtihad cannot be optimal beyond the instance in which we conceive of it. For as soon as newer minds come and newer debates arise, we will find out that whatever we conceived of is not optimal, so we will have to refashion it. So it's a constant process of fashioning and refashioning. Now we said, according to the Imamiyah, the A'imma Salamullah alayhim ajma'in also have the right to tashri'. Now, what is tashri' by definition? Tashri' is the independent right of the Prophet and the Imams to legislate. But that legislation of theirs is attributable to God Himself. So when the Prophet says, do this, it is as if God is saying, do this. And therefore, it carries the notion of disobedience and sin and possibly punishment in the hereafter. That is the meaning of tashri', that the Prophet says do this, and God says it is as if I am saying do this, but it is at a different tier. There are 2 or 3 tiers at which God is commanding us. One is the Quran, one is Jibreel inspiring the Prophet, one is the Prophet's own discretion. But if we were to say it is tashri', then that means furthermore there are theological implications that disobeying that command is a form of sin. So now here we continued with our discussion, and the lengthy prelude that I'm going to set today is for a reason, because we need to go into today's talk with this prelude. Now we stated that if we were to maintain that the Imam did tashri' as far as the Sharia law is concerned, then we are ending up with a lot of problems. How? The first thing is that the audience to which the Imam is speaking will ask the Imam, source it from the Quran or the Sunnah for us. Sunnah here is the conduct and the statement and the approvals of the Prophet. So the Imam would be duty bound to say, well, this is how I've sourced it. So if the Imam is duty bound to provide a response and the rationale as to how he sourced it, then it is no longer tashri', it is interpretation. And therefore, it means it is ijtihad of the Imam, his personal discretion in terms of the utility of his intellect. The most we can say is that the Imam's ijtihad is impeccable, most optimal, as was the case of the Prophet in his own time. The Imam's ijtihad is impeccable. It is as if God is saying, yes, this is the most optimal, whatever he is saying. If we were to say otherwise, we are ending up with a lot of problems. Think about it this way, that the golden principle states, the one that the Prophet issued and the one that was repeated by the Imam subsequently, that whatever you find from me, contrast it with the Quran. If it is in conflict with the Quran, throw it away. If it accords with the Quran, then accept it. So if the Imam were to do tashri', then the people subsequently will say that this statement of the Imam is in conflict with the Quran and therefore it is inaccurate and it loses authenticity. So what is the point of it? Can you see this? 2, the prophetic narration in which the Blessed Prophet stated, I leave with you 2 weighty things, the book of God and my progeny. The book of God is heavier and my progeny is lighter. How do you make sense of this? The best way to understand this is the Prophet is giving a legal epistemology to us. That the Quran in its ambiguity is more essence bearing. And the progeny, because they are more contextual in their own context, they will give you the extensions and the interpretations of the Quran. And that's why the heavy one is the source for the family to adhere. And therefore, if they go against the Quran, you are supposed to reject those statements as being falsely attributed to them. Now, there are other principles as well in jurisprudence that we can use to nullify the whole of this idea of tashri'. And on that point, if we were to take that verse, مَا أَتَاكُمُ الرُّسُولُ فَخُذُوا وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا, if whatever the Prophet gives you, take, and whatever the Prophet stops you from, refrain from it. You see, this verse has to be contextualized in its own context, because if not contextualized and seen in its absolute sense, then that would bring us a theology that the Prophet can abrogate the Quran. And indeed, our initial grand theologians have all speculated, or the great one of them all has speculated that yes, this is a possibility, but it has never happened. But it is not even a possibility. Why? Because the golden principle would put a stop to it, because the golden principle says, whatever I say that is inconsistent with the Quran, throw it away. So we can't make sense of it. So we can't stretch those verses in that way. However, there is a region, an area, a space in which tashri' is very, very meaningful. Now, yesterday we pointed at this, that if we were to adhere to this notion of tashri', i.e. legislative authority, wilayah tashri'iyya, then we get into the muddle that we are in at present, where the Quran is being superseded by the hadith. Can you see that? That the Quran is saying one thing, the hadith is saying something else, and we are adhering to the hadith and not to the Quran. At the back of the mind, whether the jurisprudence have this notion of legislative authority or not, but that is exactly what we are displaying in our epistemic method, legal method within epistemology, legal epistemology, in our legal method of deriving the laws of the Sharia. As I said, there is a particular space in which wilayah tashri'iyya, or authority to add to Sharia, here I will not use the word legislative, but the authority to novelly give to Sharia and add to Sharia is meaningful. And what is that space? That space is in spiritual literature, the du'as and the ziyarat. You do not find them in the Quran or on the tongue of the Prophet. Yet we say reciting ziyarah is mustahab, reciting dua kumail is mustahab on this night, so on and so forth. We say that, don't we? Open Mafatihul Jinan, you will see a list of duas that are mustahab on particular days, ziyarat that are mustahab in particular occasions. If we were to accept this, then there are 2 interpretations. One is that it is always recommended to pray to God. It is always recommended to salute and to pay homage to the friends of God, the Prophet and the previous prophets and the families of the prophets and the blessed progeny of our last prophet. But that is a general recommendation. To say that this particular dua is mustahab, To say that this particular ziyarah is mustahab shows therefore that the imam who has uttered it has the authority to novelly introduce within the Sharia, and God is endorsing it as if God is giving it that status. So for us to say this dua is mustahab, this particular dua is mustahab, not in the capacity of general prayers, we have already concluded that they have the authority to introduce within the Sharia, whether legislative authority or a broader authority. And that is why it gets the designation of mustahab. Otherwise, the laws, wajib, haram, mustahab, mubah, makruh, are in the hands of God. If we say this is mustahab, then it means that the imam who has uttered it and who has prescribed it has the authority to introduce within Sharia in a way that God endorses it. Right. Here we leave wilayat tashri'iyya as we embark on today's topic. What is tashri'? Not wilayat tashri'iyya, but tashri', according to the Imamiyya school of thought. Tashri', if you look at the words of the great Naini, who is teacher, and others, who have actually came and given succinct definitions to these ideas as they were all been floating about. These sort of grand people came and put it encapsulated in a small sentence that is both inclusive and exclusive. So he says tashri' is attribution of anything to God without knowledge. So we ask, what do you mean without knowledge? He says without knowledge means even if it is speculative. So even if you say there is a great probability that this thing is mustahab, and I am saying it is mustahab, then that is known as tashri', and that is haram. The other meaning of tashri' is to act something out with the understanding that this is required by God without knowledge. So one is attributing anything to God without knowledge, even if it is a great probability, and the other one is acting out something with an understanding that this is ordained by God, even if it is mustahab. All of these are tashri', and they are haram. Now, I don't want to discuss the distinction between tashri' and bid'ah, but the distinction should have become obvious by now, that in bid'ah nobody claims it's a part of religion ordained. They just say it's a religious practice that we have introduced. But tashri' is far deeper. Tashri' is, it is not only we have introduced, but that it is attributed to God and God is ordaining this. Further on, they qualify a very narrow definition of tashri', that even if somebody were to attribute something to God, and coincidentally, it turns out that God actually endorsed it, but the person attributing doesn't know it, that too is tashri'. Can you see that? A person attributes something as mustahab without full knowledge, and later on, it turns out that actually it was mustahab. Even then, it is a form of tashri', and that is haram and not allowed by the school of thought. If this is clear, now we embark on today's discussion. The phenomenal contribution of the Blessed Prophet Muhammad and his progeny sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wal anbiya Allah afdal as-salatu was-salam, because all of them are the same. La nufarriq bayna ahadin min rusuli. All of them, salawat on all of them. It is a great failure that we don't do salawat on Adam and Nuh and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa. Look at these lights of God. They were the gems of our humanity, and we take pride that our humanity can reach at a peak where Moses stands there with a broken staff in front of a raging sea and says, Kalla inna ma'ya rabbi sayahdeen. We will not drown, with me is God and He will guide us at that perilous moment. If a man has that much conviction, we salute him. It's a shame we've forgotten these prophets. Subhanallah. And another old man builds an ark in the middle of a desert. Can you imagine building an ark in the middle of the desert? How much conviction you must have. Imagine. Anyway, the phenomenal nature of these people was in their spirituality and in their virtue. Think about this. The Prophet said, بُعِثْتُ لَأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent to complete virtues and to bring you to the peaks of morality. The human gem in there has to be refined to make it godly through God-centricity. The message of Prophet Muhammad is not in ruku and sajda. The real message of Prophet Muhammad is, when we do ruku, the heart surrenders to Allah. When we do sajda, the soul melts away in God and discretion is given away to Him. That is a ruku and sajda for the Prophet. When we stand from salah, the greed is removed from the heart, the jealousy is removed, the intolerance is effaced. We become godly creatures. That is the real exemplary teaching of Prophet Muhammad. We have reduced it to gestures of ruku and sajda. Can you see this? The real exemplary nature of Prophet Muhammad and his family and the prophets that went before them was what happens in there. And therefore, what they taught with impeccable knowledge that was accurate and they had access to the unseen was the nature of God, the nature of hereafter, and how to be God-centered and aligned with God and how to bring about the best of our humanity. That is their message. And that is conveyed where? That is conveyed through their spiritual teachings. If you look at the sermons of the Prophet in which he talks about God, subhanallah. And Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he introduces God, that He is with everything, yet He touches nothing. He is other than everything, yet there is no distance between Him and anything. That is the real teaching. The salah is a bodily need of ours in order to regulate the inner being, to bring out the inner substance. If you look at their spiritual literature, read the dua of Kumail. A person immersed in his beloved. Look at the different layers that are there. He approaches him as a master, then as a friend, then as a parent, then as a beloved. Anybody reading that dua will say, subhanallah, this is a treasure plucked from the treasure, from the throne of God itself. This is that treasure. Look at some of the tasbih in Joshan Kabir. Ya kanzal fuqara, or the treasure of those who own nothing. Ya sanada man la sanada la, or the pillar for the one who has no pillar, or the friend for who has no friend, or the physician for the one who has no physician. Look at these God-centric prayers. Turn to Sahifa Sajjadiyah, the du'as attributed to the fourth Imam. Look at how God-centric they are. Their real message is in these du'as. And these are the du'as that shape us, our spirituality, our God-centricity. They bring out the godliness in us. And then their moral example. Look at Hussein. In the midst of arrows and swords, with burning thirst, blood oozing from his body. Look at his words. Antiqati fi kulli hali wala ma'bud siwak. You are the one I turn to in every state, and there is none worthy of worship other than you, O Lord. Surrendered I am to your decree, O God. Except I do your command, O God. Look at that. That is the gem. That is what they are all about. So it is their du'as that are the real contribution, their spirituality. You will see these imams, you don't need, and these prophets, you don't need miracles to tell you that who they are. Just read their supplications. Just look at their character and conduct and you will say, wow, these were another thing altogether. They are cut from the same cloth of the substance of the Prophet. Now I want to say something. From the 6th Imam to the 11th Imam, read their statements. They were against sectarianism. They were saying, pray with the Muslims, have familial ties with them, sit with them, honor your trust, be one. Sadiq Salamullah alayhi said, do one Eid, all of you, do not be divided in your Eid. One of the Imams said, praying with your other brothers, at that time there was no Sunni Shia, but other brothers, right? Is like praying with the Prophet himself. This is the 6th Imam onwards to the 11th Imam. They were of the nature of their blessed grandfather Muhammad Rasulullah. They can never teach anything inconsistent with the spiritual, God-centric, loving message of the Quran or Prophet Muhammad. They cannot teach people hatred. They cannot teach people cursing. They can't. It is below their dignity. These people are exemplary for Muslims as a whole, immediately, and they are exemplaries for humanity as a whole. Look at how broad their grandfather was. In the Quran, the verse comes, say to the people of the book, "Ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawain baynana wa baynakum." Come to that which is commonly shared by us and you, that we will worship none but Allah. He was talking to them to come for congregational worship of Allah together. These are the Jews and the Christians. Today, Sunni and Shia say that their prayers are void if they pray with each other. Where have we gone? Are we following the Quran? Are we following the blessed Prophet Muhammad? Who are we following? The blessed Prophet Muhammad said, do not uproot even little plants and plant more trees. And we are saying, kill human beings. And that too in the name of God. Where have we gone to? Where have these teachings come from? Where is this hatred and rancor come from? Do you really think those imams were full of hatred and cursed everybody day and night? Do you really think that the imams could teach such a thing? Now I'm going to put a theological problem here as we go into this, and I'm going to elaborate for you. And if I run over my time, forgive me. In Ziyarat Ashura, when the Shia community recited it last year in Pakistan, it was broadcasted. So the Sunnis heard that they are saying, oh Allah, curse the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and Yazid the fifth. They said these four are the four Khulafa, or Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Muawiyah, and then Yazid, right? The Sunnis, they have many denominations, Barelwi and Deobandi, who call each other kafir. And then we have the Ahlul Hadith and the Salafi, who call the Barelwi and the Deobandi kafir. So they are calling each other kafir. For the first time, all of them united to call Shia kafir. Go and have a look on YouTube, the processions that took place. In response, you will see a mosque with the name of Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein. They threw their slippers on the names of Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima. Now, the Quran says, do not curse the people who call on to other than God, lest they curse Allah without knowledge. This is a natural reaction, isn't it? Now I'm saying to you, I'm asking you one thing. Do you think an imam who the group claims has the knowledge of the future and hidden knowledge did not see the consequences of what he was teaching? Are you telling me that when the Imam taught Ziyarat Ashura, he did not know what will happen in the 20th and 21st century because of the Ziyarat Ashura, that people will be killed and there will be full-scale bloodbath, and his own grandparents, the brother of the Prophet Ali, and the queen of women, Fatima, their names will be disrespected? In retaliation, these people said, God bless Yazid. Imagine. God bless Yazid. Who in their right mind would say this? So either admit that the Imam doesn't have the knowledge of the unseen and future knowledge, or admit that the Imam has it and admit that these ziyarat are not from him. They could not have given anything so loosely. I made a comment in the first lecture that we are taught hatred. We are nurtured on hatred, to the extent that we hate the names of the Khalifa, don't we? And I made the comment that the Imams named their children the names of the Khulafa. Uthman, Abu Bakr, Umar, they're all names that are used by Imams to name their children. We hate the name Aisha. Aisha is a name used by our Imams for their daughters. They never hated the names. Yes, they might have thought, yes, wrong has been done, but they never hated the names. Can you see our psychology? Where we have gone to and how far we have come. So now when it comes to spiritual literature has to be God-centered, has to be something that teaches us tolerance, teaches us the communal spirit, teaches us love for humanity. It has to be God-centered and in line with the message of the Quran. It cannot be filled with hatred or sectarianism because these stand contrary to the sentiment of the Blessed Prophet and his family. Now I'm saying, a lot of the du'as are beautiful, impeccable, and we can say, yep, this is from the substance of the Prophet. And these legitimately are accepted as part of tashriq, that God would ordain them as His. But majority of what goes in the name of dua and ziyarat is damaging, not from the Prophet and his family, and it is creating a mindset of hatred and a counterproductive mindset. It is moving us away from God altogether. Now, because of the importance of this, I thought we will take a cursory look at some of the prominent du'as that we read in ziyarah. So we'll look at dua nudba. Do I see smiles on your faces? So you've forgotten the recent history, haven't you? Salawat. So here, what happens is that we point out that dua nudba cannot be ascertained to have emanated from the imams. The counter argument is brought that no, there is a principle of tasamuh or leniency. The principle of leniency states that there is a hadith from the Prophet, and then later on imams repeated it, that whatever you receive as attributed to us, if you act in accordance with it, then you will have its reward. Now, first and foremost, Sayyid Sistani, like Sayyid Al-Khuy, rejects it. Look at Minhajus Salihin, he said, look, I reject this principle, there is no such principle. So if you want to act in accordance with these things, then make an intention that may God accept. So something does not become mustahab through the principle of leniency. Khuy and Sistani, and they've all rejected it. Yeah? So there is no question of principle of leniency. Now, if the principle of leniency does not work, and we cannot establish that a dua is from the imam, to say that this dua to be recited is mustahab is a form of tashriq, and tashriq is haram. Have you got that? In accordance with the jurisprudential principles of the Imami group. Now we look at the principles. First, the chains have to exist. And if there is weakness in chain, then you can use the principle of leniency. Okay? The first thing is the chains need to exist. If the chains don't exist, you can't use the principle of leniency to even claim that, oh, it might be. You get it? Forget about saying it is. You can't even say it might be with that confidence. Two, if the chains do exist, but the content is conflicting with the Quran, then again it has to be abstained from, because nothing can conflict with the Quran. That's the golden principle, right? Three, if it is not God-centered, then again it has to be rejected, because that can't be a dua. Dua is something that you have with God. You have tawassul and iltija and istighatha with other than Allah, but dua is with Allah. In terms of ziyarah is not God-centric. Ziyarah is centered with the Prophet and the Imam, the one who is being saluted. So the ziyarat are person-centered, duas are God-centered. Now if we've got all of this, then we come to dua nudba. There is a claim made by Majlisi that this is from the sixth Imam. He doesn't quote any chains. As soon as that happens, you reject the whole of the dua totally. You said there are no chains. You can't verify anything. Now imagine our four canonical works. Kafi, Furu'a Kafi, Istifsar, Man La Ya'darul Faqih, and Tahdib. These four canonical works, even there, the ulama will say they have to be subjected to the biographical scrutiny. So what if Kulaini found it sahih? We will not find it sahih. And we pointed out a few days ago that Kulaini, the great Kulaini, has hadith that the Quran is incomplete. So we have to reject that hadith altogether. So what? If Shaykh Kulaini is saying it as grand as he was, we can't accept it. Here, Majlisi doesn't even bring a chain. When Majlisi doesn't even bring a chain, it is a non-starter. No leniency can work, no, nothing can work. Now, if we were to accept that, okay, let us go past the chain business, and I'm going to revisit the chain again. Let's look at the content. Look at rationally how inconsistent the content is. If the sixth Imam has said, read this dua as a mustahab on every Friday, on Eidul Adha and Eidul Duha and Eidul Ghadir. Sorry, Eidul Adha and Eidul Fitr and Ghadir. It is claimed that the sixth Imam has said it is mustahab to read this every Jum'ah, the two Eids and Eidul Ghadir. Then in this case we will ask, why was the 12th Imam crying for Mahdi 200 years prior to his birth? Nudba means lamentation, right? Or why is the sixth Imam teaching his followers to cry for Mahdi 200 years prior to Mahdi's birth? 2, if it is supposed to be recited on Eid, then why did the followers of the Imam never recite it in the time of the sixth Imam onwards till the 12th Imam? Why didn't any of the followers recite it on the 3 Eids and on Jum'ah? We find no record of it. 3, there was a whole period of confusion of 100 years from the occultation of the 12th Imam. Why wasn't this dua presented as an evidence that, look, there is a 12th Imam? The 6th Imam had foretold it. Why wasn't this dua presented as an evidence? 4, the dua has a caption which says, where are you? Are you in Tuwa or are you at Rabwa? Why is the 6th Imam saying, where are you to him? He's not even taken birth yet. So you can see logical flaws in this dua. Going forward, we see that it is narrated again. Now I'm going to read this. The real source of Dua Nudba is Muhammad bin Ja'far Mashhadi, also known as Ibn Mashhadi, who died in 610 after Hijrah, in his book Mazar al-Kabir. And then Sayyid Ibn Tawus in 664, in his Misma al-Zair and Iqbal al-A'mal, in both of his books. These two earliest sources make the same claim of how the dua was sourced by them. Looking at the wording of Ibn Tawus, it can be assumed that Ibn Tawus is quoting from Ibn Mashhadi either directly or indirectly. Majlisi also, in another one of his books, quotes it from Ibn Tawus. Now they say, Mashhadi quotes, Muhammad ibn Abi Qurra mentioned that I transmitted this dua from the book of Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Hussein ibn Sufyan al-Bazawfari, who mentioned that this dua is for Sahib al-Zaman and it is recommended to be supplicated on the 3 days of Eid and Jum'ah. Now there are 3 fundamental issues here. 1, the dua is not claimed to have been given by the Imam. Can you see that? The claim is that this dua is for the Imam. So the principle of leniency cannot be used, and nobody can say that the Imam has given this, and therefore to say that the Imam has given this and consequently Allah has given this is a form of tashriq, and that is not allowed. That's the first thing. And the principle of leniency cannot work. 2, we observe that Muhammad ibn Abi Qurra is understood to be a contemporary of Ahmad ibn Ali al-Najashi, who died in 450. Now Najashi was a great biographer, which means that the gap is of around 100 years exists between the death of Ibn Abi Qurra and the birth of Ibn Mashhadi. Now in that gap of 100 years, there are no reporters quoted. So again, we cannot verify the chain. Can you see that? Similarly, it is not known if the book of Abi Qurra was popular enough at the time to be recognized as authoritative. The other thing is, well, the book was very authoritative and all the ulama were reading from it. So the chains must have been there by implication. We are saying even the book is not known to be popular. So that speculation also goes. However, even if it was recognized as authoritative, its sources would still need to be put to scrutiny, as with Al-Kafi and rest of the Shia canonical works. Third, the source for Abi Qurra is the book of Abu Ja'far Muhammad bin Al-Hussein ibn Sufyan al-Bazawfari. Please don't get bored and listen attentively. Reading all these names, I'm getting a dizzy spell. So listen to it again, okay? I will repeat it again. Because I got confused and I thought, if I've gotten confused, what about you guys, The source for Abi Qurra, are you listening? Is the book of Abu Ja'far Muhammad al-Hussein ibn... okay, fine. I'll just put it mellowly here. All right. Bazawfari was the teacher of the great Shaykh Mufid. The great Shaykh Mufid is the teacher of Tusi. Now, if Bazawfari has quoted a dua that is mustahab to be recited on 3 Eids in every Jum'ah, then why doesn't Mufid mention it? Tusi has got an authoritative work as claimed by us in compilation of du'as and ziyarat. Why doesn't Tusi report dua nudba? If it was ascertained that it is from the 12th Imam, then why don't these grand people actually state this dua in their works? Therefore, we note that there is no claim that the dua was dedicated by the 12th Imam. The only claim is that the dua was for the 12th Imam. And at most, what this means is that I am saying, which is Bazawfari saying, that it should be prayed for the 12th Imam. So the case of its mustahab is a total state of tashri'. Tashri' is being done here, and that is not valid in the madhab. 2, there are no chains from Mashhadi to Ibn Abi Qurra. So we can't verify the chains. It's not claimed that it is from the 12th Imam. And 2, there are no chains. 3, why hasn't Mufid or his student Tusi quoted this in their famous works? And why wasn't this dua famously recited by the followers in Ghibatul Sugra or after Ghibatul Sugra until the time Mashhadi records it in his book, which is 600 and something? So all these anomalies say that this dua cannot be attributed to any of the Imams. Now there are inconsistencies that this dua has with the Quran. In a caption, it says, and you gave the Prophet knowledge of what has gone and what is to transpire until the time of the day of Qiyamah. Now this is totally inconsistent with the Quran. The Quran makes the Prophet say, O Muhammad, say, قُلْ لَا أَمْلِكُ لِنَفْسِي نَفْعًا وَلَا ضَرًّا. I do not possess for myself any benefit, or I cannot ward off any harm, إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهِ, except for whatever Allah wants. وَلَوْ كُنْتُ أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبِ. And if I had known the unseen, لَاسْتَكْثَرْتُ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ وَمَا مَسَّنِيَ السُّوءُ. I would have increased in goodness and no evil would have befallen me. The Prophet is saying, if I had known the unseen, and the dua is claiming that you gave him all knowledge till the day of Qiyamah. Another verse, وَمَا أَدْرِي مَا يُفْعَلُ بِي وَلَا بِكُمْ. The Prophet is said, I do not know what will be done to me or to you. I don't know. The dua is inconsistent with the Quran. And the third is, قُلْ لَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي خَزَائِنُ اللَّهِ وَلَا أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبِ. Muhammad, say to them that I do not have the treasures of God and I don't know the unseen. So it's conflicting with the Quran. It cannot be accepted. Now there are other things that I wanted to bring here, but I'll just do it very quickly. The dua has to be God-centered. You can't pray to the 12th Imam. Half of the dua is God-centered. The other half is us directly talking with the Imam. That's no longer a dua. This is not what the Prophet and his family has done, and this is not what they have taught. And we don't ask the 12th Imam to pray for us in a dua fashion like that. This is unknown in the likes of the Dua Kumail, Dua Sabah, and the duas in Saif Sajadiyah. These are later duas that have been developed by who knows who. Now we come to Ziyarat Ashura. The bitterness that is there. It is quoted in Kamilu Ziyarat. Abul Qasim Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Qawlaway. Now my learned colleague who is sitting on the right and the other colleague who is sitting in the other room, they know these names by heart. I can't even remember my daughter's name properly at time. Subhanallah. Anyway, he is the teacher of Sheikh Kulaini. He's the student of Sheikh Kulaini and the teacher of Mufid. So guy is very prominent. Ibn Qawlaway. He has brought this ziyarat in his Kamilu Ziyarat in his book. Now, first and foremost, there are about 4 odd chains. And the ulama find faults with all of the chains. And they find fault with Al-Qama himself, who is the original narrator, Al-Qama. And you know the dua Al-Qama, the amount of rancor and hatred, and God curse him and finish his eyes off and ears off, and make him deaf and blind, and put cancer in his head, and put faqr in his household, and his wife and children have done nothing wrong. Do you really think the Imam could teach this? Put poverty in his household, my enemy. But Imam Ali said to Kumail, when Kumail said Muawiyah's forces have attacked, let us mount a reprisal, yes, and a counterattack. Imam Ali wrote back, said, Kumail, how did you even imagine that I would ever concede to something like this? The perpetrators of the crime have long gone. You are asking me to attack innocent people, and even a single innocent person be killed? That is Ali. Didn't Ali say, by Allah, I would much rather stand bare feet on thorns and be enchained and dragged on my face by my forelock than to go to Allah and His Habib on the day of Qiyamah with any form of crime against their creatures. This is Ali. Do you think the Imam would teach you to read dua that put poverty in his household so that he forgets me, and in his household are his mother and father and wife and children, and all of them suffer? So here, the ulama find faults with all of the chains of Ziyarat Ashura. Now, that to one side, we find that Ziyarat Ashura has two parts. The first part that finishes before the 100 times tasbih. And the second part is 100 times tasbihs, right? Now the 100 times tasbihs we don't find, according to many, in Kamilu Ziyarat, the original Kamilu Ziyarat. It was added afterwards. So that's the first thing. There are many anomalies here. And in the second part, the tasbih begins, Allahumma al'an awwala zalimin zalama haqqa Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. O Lord, curse the first oppressor who seized the right of Muhammad and his family. Now, we all know who the first oppressor is in the mindset of those people who recite this. There is no case of doing taqiyya and being clever and things like that. It is quite obvious who is meant by this. So Sayyid Fadlullah and others claim that, look, this part is not of Ziyarat Ashura at all. I feel the whole Ziyarat Ashura is not inauthentic, and I want to go through it properly. Yes? Why the whole of it cannot be accepted? But Sayyid Fadlullah questioned this part. He said, this cannot be from an Imam, the second part. Then we have this, after the 100 tasbihs. Allahumma khussa anta awwala zalimin bil la'ni minni wabda' bihi awwalan thumma thani wa thalith wa rabi Allahumma la'an Yazid khamisa. O Lord, curse the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and Yazid the fifth one. Now, you ask the group, what do you mean by 1, 2, 3, 4? They will say, well, the first one was Kabil who killed Habil. The second one was the killer of of Saleh's camel. The third one is the killer of Nabi Yahya, possibly, or Imam Ali. Yes? Or Imam Ali, and then the fourth one is the killer, of Nabi Yahya, and then Imam Ali's killer, and then Yazid. We will say, what relevance do those people have to this? What relevance do they have to this? And two, if it was them, why should we leave it ambiguous to even give a notion that it is other than them? The Imam should have just said, Allahumma khussa anta awwala, Allahumma khussa anta Kabil bil la'n, thumma aqirun naqa, thumma qatil Yahya, thumma Abdul Rahman ibn Muljim. Why couldn't the Imam have said this? So there's no ambiguity left. At least their followers will not be killed at mass scale. So we have three interpretations that the group gives for this. The first one is, it's the first Khalifa, second Khalifa, third Khalifa, Muawiyah the fourth, and Yazid the fifth. I said, I'm going to be very open, because these things need to be said. These are the four. This is what the group says. Then in another place they say, no, it is Kabil, the killer of the camel, the killer of Yahya, the killer of Imam Ali, and then Yazid the fifth one. In another instance they say, no, it is Shimr, Khawli, and the killers of Imam Hussein in particular. If you see historically, you will see a whole scale confusion. Well, who do you mean is the first, second, third, fourth? And every time they were bending it as and how they saw it appropriate. As I'm saying, the deen of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad is a supreme deen. It has been reduced to hatred and cursing. Now, that's the second part. We can safely say that the second part we cannot admit to. There's a lot of anomalies in there. I'm saying the first part is full of anomalies as well. And I'll pick out, well, maybe not full of anomalies. Some of them may not appear as anomalies to others, but they do to me. But some are blatant anomalies. How? Now look at this particular caption. Allahumma inna hadha yawm tabarrakat bihi banu umayya wa ibnu akilat al-akbat. Oh Allah, this is the day in which Banu Umayyah seek blessing, and the children of the consumers of liver, i.e. the children of Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, meaning Muawiyah and Yazid. Al-La'in ibn al-La'in, the accursed, the son of accursed. So here the accursed is either Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, or Muawiyah, the son of Abu Sufyan. It can't be other. Now look at what comes after. Al-La'in ibn La'in, the cursed, the son of the cursed. Ala lisanika, upon your tongue. Wa lisani nabiyika, and upon the tongue of your prophet. Fi kulli mawtinin wa mawqifin waqafa fihi nabiyuk. In every instance and at every place your prophet stood. I'm going to take you to a place where the prophet did stand. And I want to ask you if the prophet did curse. The prophet stood in Makkah at the time of the conquest of Makkah. Abu Sufyan and the rest of them came to him. They embraced Islam and he said, you are all free on this day. Yes, Muawiyah was there. There is no blame on anybody on this day. This is the blessed prophet saying it. Subsequently, they became evil, no doubt. Previously, they were evil, no doubt. But at that point, did the prophet secretly curse them? In which case, the prophet will be incongruous. Physically, he's saying one thing, in his heart there is something else. Can you admit to such a prophet? Can you say that the prophet was being hypocritical? You are all free, there's no reproach, Allah curse him. Can you say this about the blessed prophet? He's at the peak of morality. Factually, this whole statement is flawed. It is a wrong statement. It's a very, very loose statement, whoever was constructing this ziyarah. Then, and I don't want to beat on about this, but Muawiyah, Abu Sufyan said, and of course we need to check it against different sources. Abu Sufyan said, Ya Rasulullah, I have a very bad name because I am your sworn enemy. Now in order for me to gain some respectability, give Muawiyah some post in your administration. So the Prophet said, okay, let him be one of my scribes. Muawiyah never wrote down the Quran, never. It is fact. But the Prophet, in order to allay the fear of his bitter enemy, because his rahmah lil alameen is the mercy to the whole world. Yes? He said, okay, fine. Was the Prophet secretly cursing Abu Sufyan and Muawiyah at that point? It doesn't make sense. Now, in two places, if this ziyarah, see, some people are very enthusiastic. They say the ziyarah has come from the Arsh. And Mikael gives it to Jibrail. The Jibrail gives it to, great Jibrail gives it to the Prophet. The Prophet gives it to Imam Ali, so on and so forth. Yes? Some people are very enthusiastic in saying these things. Some people are very mellow and gentle and they say, no, the fifth Imam read it. I will say fifth Imam hasn't read it because there is a caption in which it says, and O Hussein, I seek to avenge your blood with an Imam from your progeny. If it was fifth Imam reading it, he would say from the Imam of our progeny, not your progeny. So at the most you can say the Imam has dictated it to somebody. Yes? So the Imam hasn't even read it, he has dictated it to somebody. Now, look at these two things I'm going to tell you now. In two places. In the first place says, أن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام مهدي ظاهر ناتج بالحق منكم. I ask Allah to grant me the ability to avenge your blood alongside Imam Mahdi, Zahir, who will be apparent, Natik, who will be speaking. But Imam Mahdi is Ghaib, isn't he? That just shows that the person who was writing this down did not fully understand the notion of Mahdi as it was going to transpire after this time. Can you see that? Then again it says, Fas'alullah alladhi akrama maqamak. I ask Allah who has blessed you with a lofty rank. Wa akramani bik, and has honored me through knowing you. An yarzuquni talaba sarika, to grant me the right to or the opportunity to avenge your blood. Ma imamin mansur, with an imam who will be assisted by you, min ahli bayt Muhammad, from the Ahlul Bayt of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The reciter wants to avenge the blood of Imam Hussein with an Imam. Who does he want to avenge the blood of Imam Hussein from? From the killers of Imam Hussein. So from Bani Umayyah, right? Can you conclude that? So therefore, the person who is rendering this is in the era of Bani Umayyah. How long has it been? It's been 1,400 years, right? Almost 1,400 years since the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and since this ziyarah. So the person who was actually rendering this ziyarah was in the time of Bani Umayyah, and he was anticipating an Imam al-Mansur al-Mahdi with whom he can seek revenge for the blood of Hussein by bringing down Bani Umayyah. Bani Umayyah have gone. Bani Umayyah have gone. So now in order to rectify this, we will have to spin another story. And what is the other story? Well, Bani Umayyah will be resurrected when the 12th Imam comes, and we'll put them to death again. And the whole of this issue of resurrection that we quoted a few days ago, that the first Khalifa will be resurrected, the second Khalifa will be resurrected, and all of them will be killed. Are you seeing where it's all coming from? It's a logical conclusion that if you want to avenge the blood of Hussein by killing his killers, then his killers have to be in front of you. They can't already be dead. So they have to be alive for you to kill them. So then here comes another spin, another theology, another story. My time is finished. But I'm going to read some more, if that's okay, or shall I leave it? Are you tired? Do we have consensus? Yes. We are going to Ziyarah Jamia Kabira. Now in Ziyarah Jamia Kabira, divinity that was exclusive for Allah in the Quran is being attributed to the Imams. I can't for one moment believe that a grandson of the Prophet would tell the reciter to attribute things to him that the Prophet himself is nullifying from himself. And the Quran is keeping exclusive for other than the Prophet. I can't believe that a grandson of the Prophet would say this. Even if it was true, his humility would not allow him. And even if it was true, he would never give any room for people to misconstrue their nature and attach divinity with them. But it is because of these things that we've attached divinity with the Prophet and his family. Just as our Christian brothers and cousins have attached divinity with Isa, or previously Hindu brothers of ours who have attached divinity with mere mortals as being avatars of God. As I said, this has been going on historically forever. So we come to a caption. I've been very selective here. وَالْمُظْهَرِينَ لِأَمْرِ اللَّهِ وَنَهِي وَعِبَادِهِ الْمُكْرَمِينَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْبِقُونَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ وَهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِ يَعْمَلُونَ. In Surah Al-Anbiya, you have this caption that these are our noble servants. The Quran is saying, these are our noble servants, signifying the lofty agencies, or the lofty angels, or the lofty prophets, we don't know. But the prophets had not taken physical birth in this world at that point, the way the Quran is talking about it. It was prior to the creation of Adam, it seems. So if you look at this verse, these are our noble creatures. They do not precede us in speech, and they do not disobey our command. This ayah is fitted on the Imams. Look at it. وَعِبَادِهِ الْمُكْرَمِينَ. And you are the noble creatures, الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْبِقُونَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ, who do not precede God in your speech, وَهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِ يَعْمَلُونَ, and who are acting in accordance with His order. The same verse is being fitted upon an Imam here. What? Then the Quran says to the Prophet Muhammad, عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ. You have the right, you have the duty of conveying. It is our right to hold them accountable. Then another verse comes in the Quran, which says, indeed towards us is the return of the creatures, and indeed to us is their accountability. In this ziyarah, it is saying that the Imam is teaching the followers to recite this, وَإِيَّابُ الْخَلْقِ إِلَيْكُمْ وَحِسَابُهُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ, that I bear witness that the creatures will return to you, O Imams, and they will be accountable to you, O Imams. Now, where is divinity left after this? Where is God-centricity left? Where is this notion of accountability to God left? Then, خَلَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ أَنْوَارًا فَجَعَلَكُمْ بِعَرْشِهِ مُحْدِقِينَ. حَتَّى مَنَّ عَلَيْنَا بِكُمْ. He created you as lights and placed you at the foot of the throne until He until He blessed us with your physical birth. This is the same theology that we talked about in Kulayni's hadith and other ahadith, that they were created prior to the whole creation. There were lights placed at the foot of the throne. These are things that have crept in. There is no validity to any of this in the Quran. The Blessed Prophet has never said this. The Blessed Imam Ali has never said this. Al-Hasan al-Hussein have never said this, and this has come afterwards. And the Quran said, if you don't know something, don't commit yourself to it. Then we come to this caption, which is referred to twice in Ziyaratul Jamia. وَمُؤْمِنٌ بِإِيَّابِكُمْ مُصَدِّقٌ بِرَجْعَتِكُمْ. And we have full faith that you will return once again and you will be brought back to the earth before the day of Qiyamah, Raj'ah. This whole theology is suspicious according to our ulama. It cannot be sourced. But we honor our imams through reciting this. Again, وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِكُمْ. And the earth will radiate with your light. God is saying, وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا. The earth will shine with the light of its Lord. The same verse of Lord is fitted on the imams. These are few of the observations that we make. And with that, we see that the du'as that are God-centered, that are full of, and we're going to discuss this tomorrow, personal relationship with God as a parent, as a friend, as a Lord. These are the true contributions of the Prophet and his family. And these bring about within us directedness to God and God-centricity. These later du'as and ziyarat are a full-scale attribution to the imams that cannot be proven either by virtue of their reports and chains or by virtue of their content. I'm just asking my listeners to be attentive and to think about what they are reading and to reflect upon it. Imam Hussein, en route to Karbala, said, I go to revive the faith of my grandfather Muhammad. The faith of his grandfather Muhammad was surrender to Allah in the best possible way that Allah has taught us. We come to the mention of that martyrdom, after which Hussein dies. He does not live beyond him. A great, great person who was an outcome of the supplication that Imam Hussein made. After the death of his grandfather, when Imam Hussein got married, he said, "Oh Allah, grant me a child that resembles your messenger." They say that Akbar's stature, features, speech and mannerism reminded one and all of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Akbar is next to Imam Hussein en route to Karbala. Imam Hussein slept on his steed and awoke abruptly and called out, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." Akbar said, "O father, indeed we belong to Allah and we return to Him. But what brings the words of istirja to your tongue?" He said, "O child, as I slept, I heard a call that, O caravan, approach to your imminent deaths." Akbar said, "O father, are we not upon the truth?" Hussein said, "Indeed, O child." Akbar said, "O father, what difference does it make in that case, whether death comes to us or we rush in the embrace of death?" Such is Akbar. The battle comes to a point where the companions of Hussein have all been killed. The family of Hussein remains, the gallant warriors and the swordsmen. Hussein comes to his Akbar. He says, "O child, I would like you to give your sacrifice first on my behalf, on behalf of an old father." Akbar said, "Oh father, may I live for you and die for you." He said, seek permission from the women. We find this description that as Akbar enters the tent, there were cries that were heard. The cloth of the tent lifted and dropped several times, as if whenever Akbar was trying to exit, they would surround him, unable to let him go. He comes bidding them farewell. His father looks at him and he says, "Oh Allah, bear witness that now I send to them that son of mine who most bears resemblance with your messenger in his features, in his speech, in his mannerisms. Whenever our hearts pained for your messenger, we looked at Akbar." Hamid ibn Muslim says, Hussein cried out aloud, as if a mother cries and mourns her dead son. Akbar ascends his steed. Hussein says, "Go, O child, go. But, O child, do not make haste. Go slowly." Akbar went slowly. He heard something. He turned and he looked. His father was following him, crying and unable to control himself. With his hands upon his chest, he says, "O father, have you not bid me farewell?" "Indeed, O child." "Then what is this that I see from you, O father?" "O child, O Akbar, had you an Akbar, you would not have asked this question." Akbar begins to enter into the battlefield. We have this report. As he appears, they said, "Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah." They looked at him and they saw who was in front of them. They may have remembered the Blessed Prophet, for some recognized him. "I am Akbar, the son of Hussein. How dare you withhold water from him? Face the wrath of the son of Hussein, the sword of the Hashim. See how he descends upon you." They broke the custom of single combat. They surrounded him. Akbar wards off their blows and kills a great many of them. Hussein stands in anguish. Do not ask me what goes and transpires upon the heart of Hussein. But Hussein makes a prayer and Akbar approaches. He says, "Oh father, the thirst kills me. The mail of cold has drained my strength from me." Hussein, looking at Akbar, says, "Oh child, from whence shall I get water for you? Place your tongue in my mouth if you can find some cool." Akbar retracts his tongue and says, "Oh father, you are thirstier than I am." He says, "Oh Akbar, put aside your shield. Take off your coat of mail. Face the enemy. Your grandfather will come and quench your thirst with the chalice of Kawthar." Akbar re-enters into the battlefield, resolved to give his life. He fights the enemies. Munkad hides behind a tree. As Akbar is fighting, Akbar is struck in several places. As he loses his balance, Munkad embeds his spear within the chest of Akbar. Akbar falls upon the mane of the steed and wraps his arms around the neck. The horse is frightened, bewildered as it runs. The enemies surround him and begin to strike him. Akbar's grip loosens. As he arrives upon the dust, he says, "Oh father, take my final farewell." Hussein runs to Akbar's body. He stands in front of his body and he says, "Oh child, how audacious they have been against God for killing you." Hussein throws the dust of Karbala in the air. This world has become a darkened place for me, Akbar, after you. Akbar is beginning to breathe his last. Hussein embraces his Akbar. He says, "Oh Akbar, have you left your old father? Do you leave me like this?" Akbar breaks into a smile and he says, "Oh father, the messenger has come and he's quenching my thirst and saying, 'Oh Hussein, hasten to me.'" Akbar breathes his last. Hussein stands defeated. Says, "O sons of Hashim, carry away your brother." As they carry Akbar, Hussein walks behind Akbar. Hamid ibn Muslim says, a woman comes out crying. She says, "Oh child, oh Akbar," and falls upon the blood-soaked body of Akbar. Hussein quickly goes to this woman, removes her and takes her back to the tents. I asked, "Who was she?" I was told this was Zainab, the aunt of Akbar. Hussein slowly moves forward. Sakina comes, "Oh father, why are you so defeated? What has happened to my brother? They have killed him." She slaps her face and she cries. He says, "Oh Sakina, bear it for the sake of Allah." "Oh father, how may I bear the killing of my brother? How may I bear that you are left without a son?" Matame Hussein.